Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I have now, after I heard Jim's emotional strategies and campaigns, I have now a topic, or I talk about products which you all know, which you have in your car, but you might never think about it. And I just want to give you hands-on how we do our researches in this area, how we integrate engineers and designer into a process who are normally not our clients. Normally it's marketing or market researcher or product managers. And yeah, first of all, warm regards from Gabby. She has an important meeting. Adient, they produced new aircraft seatings, and she has to present it on a fair, and she says warm regards, and I will take over her parts. Adient, the biggest producer of car seats. Until last year, they were also called Johnson Controls International, and they is now an own company. They produce car seats, and each year they have parts in more than 25 million cars. So you might all have sit on some of the seats or use the headrest or armrests. And producing for all makes and models, and of course they are thinking a lot about the future, autonomous driving, e-mobility, how everything will change, about future generations. We heard a lot about the Gen Z today. This is of course what they always have in mind, because we all know that mobility is changing. Maybe a few words on Concept M. We found a Concept M. Does it work? Okay, I just changed it here. It's like when I was a musician 20 years ago. Yeah, I was not a singer, but yeah, we founded Concept M in 2008. We are psychologists. We're coming from in-depth psychology. Since a couple of years, we also have a quantitative unit to combine qual and quant, and we are also a strategic think tank. We work in different branches like FMCG. I think like all of you, automotive, pharmaceutical is a big field we are in, and yeah, we work now in 42 countries. We opened our office in Beijing 4 years ago. This is quite successful because a lot of European and also American companies want to understand, of course, also the cultures over there. As you all know, the world is changing. Globalization, mobility, digitalization, additional megatrends. It's of course always the first space to think about new innovations, to take this into account. Just think of mobility. All car producers are nowadays thinking about, we're not selling cars only in the future, but also we might be maybe a mobility provider, giving you a flat rate for mobility, that you can have a convertible at the weekend or an SUV during the week. Also globalization, just look how these emerging markets, how they drive. For example, in China, they don't have an automotive tradition like you have in the US or we in Europe. Look at India, how everything is changing. Also the digitalization, new possibilities. Uber, I don't use a taxi anymore when I'm here in the US. It's forbidden in Germany, so we can't use it. But car sharing, all these big trends, and everything is somehow changing. And of course, this is first of all a base. And just think about the ways how we pay, how we order, how we rate something, how we get, before you buy anything, you go maybe to Amazon and check if the product is it good or not. And of course, all these aspects have a huge influence on the automotive sectors. As you all know, that's why we're here. It's very difficult to understand the consumers for many companies. It's abstract. We're doing a lot of segmentation and persona studies at the moment, combine qual and quant. And of course, there are a lot of schools and different ways to think about it, neuropsychology. We're coming at least from in-depth psychology or psychoanalysis, and try to understand these contradictions in human behavior, these tensions, and try at least to find solutions and thus better products. And as in the previous speech, it was said, also in politics, it's nowadays very hard to understand the voter, and I didn't want to bring a picture of Trump here or Marine Le Pen because I think it's used too often. But as you said before, Europe, for example, is divided at the moment totally. It's like a cultural clash, different opinions, and how to predict in the future. Or look at the telecommunication market. We looked at the segmentation. It was 1 year ago and was not valid anymore because something like a smart shopper doesn't exist anymore if you get a flat rate for 10 bucks or something, or even less. So there's rapid changes, and we need to find at least tools and approaches to get a better understanding. Automotive, or vehicles and drivers, and this is why we started 3 years ago to find a new typology for the automotive market. We first did it in Europe. As you can see, we have so many makes, models, features, functions, shapes, colors, materials, seat concepts. And we learned in a lot of interviews that, for example, if you have something like a second start, people maybe don't have a classical biography when it comes to cars, start with a smaller one, then a middle-sized car, a bigger one, or from B segment to E segment. But there might be disruptions in, we're also talking not about biographies anymore. Of course, it's often still the case. But look at how many divorces are, for example, in different countries, and there might be a lot of changes. So different life stages, different family situations, and of course different needs and requirements, maybe different wishes for status and appreciation, different mobility needs with regard to feeling free and whatsoever, or to restart, and we took that into account. And also when you look at the markets in the last 20 years, the number of models nearly doubled. And in Europe, we have a big trend towards the SUVs. You have them here in the US for quite a long time, and you also have a different automotive tradition somehow. At least in the suburbs, you have 3 cars, one for transports, a lot of sedans. In Germany, for example, we have a lot of station wagons. I think nearly 80% of the E-segment cars are station wagons. So a concept's rather unknown here. And most of all, you have maybe within families just 2 cars, but now you have thousands of model variations, but at the same time, a lot of people who say, oh, all the cars look alike. They're not beautiful cars anymore. Especially young women say that they're looking for lovable, nice cars, and then they all mention the Mini or the Fiat Cinquecento or other nice cars who seem to be specifically designed for women. And so Gabby and me from Adient, we saw, and of course that's obvious, there's a transition of the old car world order, increasing diversification of the market, premium brands in typical price entry segments like BMW with the first series, or the A-Class, or Audi, and also low budget brands, and low budget I mean maybe Korean market brands, for example, in premium segments having big SUVs. And also, fundamental changes in buying behavior. And of course, you might know that its source is Zukunftsinstitut from Germany. This, what I also mentioned before, the change towards individual lifestyles instead of classes and milieus, where you maybe know I'm in a specific milieu, I drive a Mercedes-Benz, or rather drive a GM or whatsoever. And so this is changing heavily, and premium brands are also available for car starters or people who just enter the market. We founded the system, we call it Automotive Consumer Lifestyles. We did it in whole Europe now. And we took different stuff into account, like the zeitgeist market structure, general trends. That's why I mentioned it in the first slides. Living environment, social environment, lifestyles. Then automotive attitudes, motives, usage fantasies, style preferences, personal tastes, and of course, this is important for someone who produces seats, personal body image, and also own bodily experiences, because in the end, we're talking about comfort and security when it comes to seating, and this is highly important. We put it into so-called Setcards. And of course, there are a lot of more information behind it, but you see here different chapters, and they are now in big posters in the engineering studios. And when the engineers are working and thinking about, they can walk in the studio, have a look at, being inspired, and of course we have a lot of ethnographic materials and videos and combined information. And we found 15 types, and from different life stages, different wishes. And maybe just a short example, we often found a cluster young women who are in the butterfly age of their life, trying to find a partner, family, love, want to have children, dreaming of a suburban life with a nice car and nice house. So not these big dreams, yeah, having a big career and all the status. And they were always complaining about, oh, it's so many cars not really made for women, and they are looking at totally different things like design, shapes, little butterflies. So some things which other might think it's a little bit cheap or something, but it is highly important for them. They want to be somehow attractive within an attractive and lovable car, and status and rivalry and being more potent, etc. is not that important. Also resale value, for example. They know they want to drive it for quite a while. And if you think of this segment, because it's not, you can say it's not a huge insight, but then you maybe think differently about how to use printing technologies, what you can do with seat trims, with the covers, with stitches, with the whole interior, how you can enable her maybe to have a better automotive experience while driving maybe in a B or C segment car. Another cluster we found, often divorced men, richer, second, third marriage, young children again, first impairments, and somehow aesthets. They loved aesthetics, collectors. And here, aesthetic has a totally different psychological function. It's more like upgrading. It's like balancing the first impairments they're feeling. Here you see this one, he said, please make a photo of my ear. He couldn't hear anymore, and he needed somehow these beautiful things he surrounded himself with to have the feeling of that there's a value retained, etc. So beautiful stuff and aesthetic stuffs here to compensate also for first impairments. And of course I can expand now on these types, but when you think of that and you think of seats, because we're talking here about seats, then you know that, of course, on the one hand, the seat needs to enable sportiveness and stability, but also needs to enable the older generation to enter and exit in the car, because that was sometimes when we observed it, how they did it, it didn't really look healthy to some degree. And here maybe just a short quote, I liked it, an older lady we drove with in California, also together with the engineers. And she explained what she likes about
there's a little triangle on the mirror.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, we should have, I don't know whether it was blind spot. It turns red and it has a beep sound. And I found that.
Prepare to turn left.
Particularly with my husband, who doesn't always look as carefully as I would like him to. It's really handy to have that.
So it was good for her husband. Yeah. But when you have the engineers on board and you see maybe something which is totally self-explaining maybe for them, and they see how to use it, and also when you think about the next stages when it comes to autonomous driving and how everything will change. So we always try to integrate the engineers, and for them, because they think as engineers. Yeah? It's also different to market researchers. Also, if you ask an engineer, could you please explain, he says, do you have a pen and a paper? Because then he's trying to write it down. And if you integrate them in the process, you're able to have at least better ideas. Car clinics are quite expensive, you know it all. Just the setup is highly expensive. Of course, we do it often, but we also do something we call car owner clinics. So in-home interviews, ethnographic interviews. We visit the people, drive with them, see their whole environment, the furnitures, how they live, what they love when it comes to luxury. And also here we try to integrate teams. Have to do it sensible, because otherwise you just have the extroverted people in the interviews. but you can collect a lot of additional material to enable them in the process. And so we let them come with their cars, or we visit them. Sometimes we hire additional cars. And this is often very enlightening experience for the engineers as well. Yeah, unusual market research issues. It's not communication testing or working on positionings. And when I started studying psychology, I never thought that I would do a study about the rear seat experience or about head restraints. But when you think about the markets, if you sell millions of head restraints, or if you sell millions of armrests, it's quite a lot of money. And of course, you try to have a multifunctional that you can use in different makes and models, and just maybe adapt trims and different options, or intuitiveness and optionality of easy entry systems. There are at least 7 in the markets now, but some are really not intuitive to use. Yeah? They block, or you have to pull instead of push. So it's not really working. And of course, also very interesting topics like autonomous driving, future of mobility. And there, for example, we see that China is ahead of Europe and the US at the moment, because also of different tradition when it comes to automotive driving and a different use of devices already in their cars. So here, of course, I can't tell the whole story, but just in a few pictures, we had to understand the rear seat area. And it's an often neglected terrain. Just look at the consumers. We let them just sit there. And some of them never did that before. Yeah? They said, I did last when I was 12 or something. And just look how she's looking. She doesn't feel really comfortable. Or this lady, she's a little bit bigger, and she had she needed to get in somehow. Or this guy, he was sitting in the land behind this driving area. And what's happening when you're sitting in the rear seat, it's often not only inconveniences, but it's like being back in a childlike position, sitting there. And I think the picture says it all. But this body memory is known from early days. My son is now 6 weeks, my second one. And if you drive them, we all know how it is to be passive, to be driven. It needs a lot of trust. You need at least trust the mother, and later on you need to trust the driver when you're sitting behind there. You can't see anything. So this is quite well known. And there are always 2 ways to tolerate the forcedly passive position. It's either laid back, accept it, hand over the reins, simply relax. Then people are often fell asleep. We had people who said, I once sit next to my boss in the car, and I fell asleep, because you can't hold it if you laid back. Or you laid forward, you're trying to play games, leaning forward, talking, when are we there? What are you doing? Can you change the music? Can you open the window? Or trying to guess which plates are there. So being active, not to have to suffer this passiveness, or to have a feeling of activeness and control. And after understanding that, of course, and more, then we can work with the engineers of how to reduce the feeling somehow of downgrading, and where different types of usage, for example, of the armrest in the rear seat area, or how to make it more comfortable. And then there are a lot of features in the armrest. I think you don't have a real clear image of what you have maybe in your armrest. You can maybe put a cup in it, but nowadays you have all the charging options. You can use it differently. You can have a workstation there. And of course, for Adient, sometimes difficult. They have great innovation, but in the sale process, it's not top of mind, of course. When it comes to the car, you think about maybe the color, and about tires, and about PS, but not about maybe armrests. But if you understand it, you can make the whole marketing and sales material much more attractive. And I know that our study, we did it in 2012, was quite successful. Another example, headrest. I never thought about my headrest before. Now I'm really a pro in headrest, and it's really a decisive factor now, because headrest, when you think of it, it is also a neglected area. But for the engineers, it's highly difficult. They get at least 800 pages in a briefing, what they have to think of, different laws. It has to prevent the whiplash, and if you have maybe a fixed one, like in the Volvo, and you can't relax, you don't have a neck relaxation, they are the safest. You also have active ones with little dynamite within it, so if you have a whiplash and you get forward, then it comes out and helps you, yeah, that you don't break your neck in the end. But most of the consumers said, when I first read the question about headrest, I thought, does my car even have one? Yeah? Does all cars have them? Do I even use a headrest? Is it part of the seat, a separate piece? So no knowledge at all. And here maybe a short example of a guy who had this car, I think, for 2 years and experienced the headrest for the first time.
There's a button, you push it in and you can adjust it then. It actually comes out, I didn't realize that. And it goes all the way down. And there's a couple of stops, I think there are 3.
Those little notches
Little
there?
Notches there.
Mm-hmm.
He pulled it out. He never used it for 2 years. Yeah? And so you buy a car, and no one, the car dealer's not saying, this is how you use your headrest. So you need to find it on your own. But in the end, if you think about it, how you use it maybe in a traffic jam differently, that if you're maybe laid back on a highway, and you can change positions and transitions, etc. And we did a study also in India. In India, for example, 120 million people wear a turban, the Sikhs, and for them, a lot of them, they don't have a headrest because it said conflicts with my turban, then they're always sitting like that. Yeah? Or women with ponytails, for example, if they have a clip in their hair, it's quite difficult. They always have to push it aside. The neck, a lot of people were complaining they have a neck ache, or if they drive for a longer time, the shoulders are aching. So that all has to do with the headrest in the end. And of course, you need to see how they move, how they react. Sometimes it's more easier, it's difficult to explain, to describe how you feel when it comes to a headrest. But you need to see what they do in the end. And we did it in I think India, China, US, and Europe. And here another example, also someone who never saw it before or used it before.
Okay, so okay, I got it. It's a pain in the neck, and there's like, I guess, a couple notches.
For us it might be, but for the engineers, they're sitting there and they can't believe it. How can it be that the consumer... Because the development of a headrest takes around about 3 years. Yeah? A whole seat can be up to 5 years. So everything we're talking about now will be in the cars in 5 years. Also the smart interactive surfaces. And it is somehow neglected. What we found out, everyone showed us the palm of the hand, something, and then we found the initial images, somehow how you hold a baby, yeah? When you have a little baby with a fragile neck and you hold it and you back it up, that this is the initial image which lies behind it. And here's just, normally it's in virtual reality, it's Adient worked on a lot of different headrest concepts, and you might see them in the next cars maybe. Really much more comfortable, more secure, nicer designs, nicer style. Maybe a short example about the integration of the engineers. It is sometimes too expensive that the whole research teams accompanies the interviews. We often work with videos just to enable them during different phases in the innovation process. And here's just some quotes from Japan and some nice sayings, so to say.
そういったドイツさんも乗り続けていらして、
そうですね、もう20代近くに乗ってますかね。
座右の銘とすると、見る前に飛べとか、あとは笑う角には福来たるですね。
And I wanted the option as well to be able to have additional children in the car.
Okay.
At the time that I bought it, I had a pet, so having my dog be able to fit in the mix. And we go back and forth to Long Island in the summer, so I needed to be able to fit some level of bags and that kind of thing.
Ich fühle mich gerne in meinem Auto wohl. Ich will natürlich auch das Auto, dass mich das Auto von A nach B bringt. Das auch sicher. Sicher in dem Sinne, ein sicheres Auto, aber auch sicher, dass das Auto nicht ausfällt. Ja, es ist halt auch manchmal ein bisschen Lebensgefühl. Manchmal ist es auch ein bisschen, drückt es auch ein bisschen aus, wie man sich gerade fühlt, wenn man sein Auto fährt. Ja.
a little bit, of course, he expanded on that, what it means. But this is how we integrate, of course, then also design and engineers who are never in contact with the consumers in the end. And this is at least our part, to have this co-creation. So the process as a whole, which Gabby and me try to integrate at Adient, is that we always start with the trend research, global cultural researches. As psychologists, of course, we always look how societies are changing, what are important influences. Then we have a co-creation phase with the market psychologists, engineers, designer, insight generation in the markets, product optimization workshops, and then if there is enough budget left, then the evaluation of the final products. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.